Hello and welcome back to the CS Global Partners channel, where today we've teamed up with New Balkans Law Office to discuss some key points in Bulgaria's investor immigration programme. We are joined by Kamen Shoylev, who is a managing partner at the New Balkans Law Office in Sofia, and Nevena Bekyarova, who is a partner there also. Kamen is a Bulgarian advocate and a barrister in England and Wales, and Nevena has 8 years of experience advising private and corporate clients. She's a pioneer in Bulgarian citizenship and nationality law. Thank you both so much for joining us today over Zoom. So Nevena, I have the first question for you, if that's possible. So please can you talk me through the fact that the BIIP has often been described as the hybrid between an RBI and a CBI programme. Would you agree with this characterisation?
The European Union Commission has identified 3 European programs as citizenship by investment. Namely, these are Bulgaria, Cyprus and Malta, as opposed to 17 others which are categorized as residence by investment programs. The main distinction appears to be whether a requirement to reside in the target country applies. Bulgaria requires local registration, however, physical presence is not required. Applicants can, however, stay in the phase of permanent residence if they don't wish to proceed to citizenship immediately and finalize the process once they decide. They can, of course, also benefit from their status in Bulgaria and actually reside in Bulgaria if they wish.
Okay, perfect. My second question for you was, while the permanent residence period to be undertaken by investors is nominal, investors also have to fulfill a travel requirement. Why is this, and also at what stage of the application process is travelling necessary as well?
Of course, yeah. Applicants are required to appear in person to lodge their residence application. This is a standard requirement applicable not only to investors but to all residents in Bulgaria. They need to make a second trip to have their ID card issued. During that trip, their biometrics are taken. There is no interview at the residence stage, although there may be a brief interview at the stage of visa application, which precedes the residence application. A language test is not conducted at any stage, simply because having command of the Bulgarian language is not a requirement.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. The third question for you, if that's all right, is that applicants in Bulgaria do not apply with their family members. Rather, some family members can apply for citizenship once the main applicant has been naturalised. Can you tell me which family members can do so and when?
Of course. Children of naturalised citizens, irrespective of their age, can apply for Bulgarian citizenship. In this respect, Bulgaria is unique because other countries tend to restrict rights to either minor children or dependent children. Children born after the investor has obtained Bulgarian citizenship, but also automatically become Bulgarian citizens. The process for the spouse follows a similar set of steps as the main investor. They apply for a visa and subsequently for a residence permit once the investor has become a permanent resident in Bulgaria. Under the fast track, the spouse of the investor may apply for citizenship once the investor has been naturalized as a citizen and once the spouse has held permanent residence for at least 3 years.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm going to move on to question 4. So Carmen, I'm going to ask you this question, if that's all right. So previously, there were only 2 investment options under the Bulgarian Immigrant Investor Programme. Now there are 7. So can you shed some light on these investment options and the corresponding investment thresholds, please?
Certainly. So indeed, historically, in fact, there were a smaller number of options. And this has been changed relatively recently in March 2021. And there was new legislation in Bulgaria. And this new legislation introduced a number of new options. One of these was a direct investment in equities or corporate bonds listed on Bulgarian regulated securities markets. The threshold there is for the initial investment of approximately €1 million, and for the second investment, if desired, to fast track yourself, a further €1 million. The majority of the other investments require a much lower threshold, or rather half of these amounts. So €500,000 approximately at first, and another €500,000 approximately if you wish to fast track yourself. These other investments include things such as an investment in what might be termed in American parlance, for example, mutual funds, or are commonly known in Europe as UCITS, or collective investment schemes. These have to be primarily focused on Bulgaria, but they can partially be invested in other markets. That is one of the investments that requires only €500,000. The other type that is relatively novel is the alternative investment funds. And these are things like hedge funds, private equity funds, real estate funds focused on a private equity type strategy, and also VC funds. And these, again, need to be Bulgarian registered vehicles which manage these funds. There is one old category which hasn't changed, and that's an investment in a private company which only works on the slow track, on the standard track, not on the fast one. So it takes 5 years. The investment there is bigger, it's €3 million. And that company is something that can typically be wholly owned by the investor and can then invest in any asset. And that might, for example, be a property in Bulgaria, or indeed overseas potentially, or it may be a business. That's one of the larger investment sizes. Then there are options such as an investment in a certified investment project, and there are various types there which require a little bit more detail than perhaps we have time for today. And then there is also an option of setting up and investing in a Bulgarian company, which then creates employment, 10 jobs at first, followed by another 10, but then the investment is €250,000 on the first occasion, and a further injection of capital of another 250. I think that probably sums up the options.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much. To be fair, what you just mentioned actually sort of leads on to my next question about the fast track route as well. That investors can apply for citizenship after 12 months of residence, but on average, how long after applying for citizenship is citizenship granted? And also from that, how long can an applicant expect to wait from submission of the citizenship application to obtaining their citizenship certificate?
Yeah, well, this varies very much on sort of bureaucratic factors, on the background and circumstances of the applicant. But when I say very much, it varies from probably the least we have seen is something like 4 to 5 months. And the most we have seen so far is in the region of 12 to 14 months. So these are the typical periods from application date. Of course, at that stage, the applicant will have been a permanent resident for a year.
Of course. Thank you very much. So question 6 for you is certain nations, such as those of the Caribbean, are known for their high standards in due diligence. How stringent is the due diligence process that is conducted under Bulgaria's programme?
It is stringent, but it's done in a different way. So in my understanding, and I'm no expert at all on the Caribbean, my understanding is that in the Caribbean, generally, most of the work is effectively privatized. It's subcontracted to organizations that have developed, private organizations globally that have developed the wherewithal to conduct this kind of background check and analysis. And then that results in reports which government institutions review. In Bulgaria, it's entirely in the hands of government. So due diligence is conducted. Applicants for most of these categories have to go through a pre-clearance process, which requires evidencing source of funds. In a couple of the categories, they have to declare the source of funds rather than necessarily evidence it, although they may be required to do so. But in addition, there is a thorough check of their backgrounds, which involves, one understands, a range of national security bodies in Bulgaria which interact with foreign such. And of course, there are items such as criminal record checks, which are also submitted.
Perfect. So do you see any room for improvement? And is there discussion in Bulgaria about implementing changes in this respect as well?
There is, we're very much sort of plugged into discussions we believe that are going on, and there is an increasingly high quality of discussion and debate around these issues and around policies. What we see as kind of interested in, as people interested in the policy around this area, doesn't necessarily always result in legislative intent. The quality, as I mentioned, of due diligence is already quite high. It is well appreciated by Bulgaria, which is a member state of the European Union, which has a fairly large public administration, which has, particularly within that administration, a relatively established and experienced workforce in security matters and in the police. It is well appreciated that there is a reputational risk to Bulgaria if it were to, in addition to the risk from more direct damage such as money laundering, tax evasion or similar. So there is already a high level, a high standard. But there are discussions indeed about potential ways of improvement, but there are at this point no obvious flaws that have been identified. Of course, there have been European programs as well, which have experienced difficulties. And in those cases, perhaps the difficulties were surrounding issues such as corruption, which I suppose is connected to background checks as well, but not only.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So we're on to the last three questions, if that's all right. So for question 7, what is the role played by third parties such as agents and lawyers in Bulgaria?
It's an important role. One can apply in Bulgaria without the benefit of legal advice or without using anyone to guide them. And indeed, we have clients who come to us for just a very small bit of advice on a couple of issues or a small bit of assistance. Most, of course, clients are generally time poor and they don't have the time to learn the Bulgarian system. And of course, every administrative process has its pitfalls. So there is that role which is played by lawyers and can be played by agents, but there is no requirement to use an agent or to use a lawyer, indeed. It's just perhaps a good idea.
Yeah, of course, of course. In your opinion, is the Bulgarian Immigrant Investor Programme at risk from EU scrutiny, do you think?
I think it is being scrutinized, or actually maybe I shouldn't be so ready to accept that it is scrutinized. It is probably something which the European Commission has found itself opposing. So such programs generally are opposed, as you would be aware, in the EU. The European Commission has taken the view that it will take legal action, potentially, as I understand it, against member states. And it's done so on the premise, as I understand it, that it believes this is a failure of these member states to properly account for their duty of sincere cooperation with other member states. So the Commission's view seems to be that who becomes a citizen of a member state is not a matter for that member state alone. It is a matter for all the member states and for the European bodies that govern the European Union, including the Commission, perhaps. Now, a more careful analysis of the European Union's constitutional treaties and of its law, as well as of international law, wouldn't readily support that position of the Commission. There doesn't appear to be a basis for this view. The Commission is perhaps interested in promoting this view, and that view may be in the future become to be accepted. But at the moment, such as the law is, it's not a correct view of the law. However, the European Commission is very effective at lobbying for its views with national governments. In the case of Bulgaria, of course, March this year, the Bulgarian Parliament adopted the recent legislation and approved this form of investor citizenship legislation. There's therefore a very recent approval by the Bulgarian legislator, and that would suggest that there is a lot of political support for this in Bulgaria.
Perfect.
So we expect it to continue for the time.
Of course. We're on to the final question, if that's okay with you. Do you expect the 2021 changes will have a significant impact on the popularity of the Bulgarian Immigrant Investor Programme?
Yes. Well, we have seen already quite a bit of interest over the last year. Bulgaria wasn't perhaps as well known as some of the other European countries like Cyprus and Malta. And I think it is now firmly on the map of investors who are interested in a second or further citizenship. And therefore, I think with this new legislation, with its stable footing, both politically and in terms of the kinds of investments that are being offered, I think it will be of great interest to investors, particularly when comparing to the other European programs, which, although more established, tend to require higher, either investment or indeed higher amounts of cash out of donations and such like. Bulgaria does not. One area where more attention probably needs to be paid is whether there are enough suitable investment products which investors like. But those investment products they are part of the general financial market in Bulgaria and in Europe, and they are emerging all the time. So there's a lot of response as well from the financial market in terms of producing new investment products in Bulgaria, including targeting investors for citizenship by investment purposes. Now, of course, investors should be careful what they invest in, and they should seek financial advice and conduct proper due diligence.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Carmen and Nevena. Have you got anything else that you would like to add on any of the topics that we've discussed today?
Not from me.
Not from me as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.